It's symbolic of a good father to be able to handle the "I hate you" every once in a while.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the road to paradise is paved with pure intentions.
Therefore, in this environment, it is important that these subjects are spoken about and shared, and in order to save people who've gone off the deep end.
My responsibility as a parent now is only unconditional love. I don't know what you need, but I believe that there's divine providence and that we're here together, and my role is to help you and guide you.
Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right. Welcome, Zalmy.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Zalmy Raksin. Apologies. We should do the whole thing over.
That's been a story of my life.
I know, I'm sure. We're sitting here with Zalmy Raksin, the executive director of Tag Academy. Tag Academy is a local yeshiva not far from here, a few miles down the road, that I guess is geared towards kids who don't fit 100% the mainstream Chabad yeshiva system.
Wow.
Is that?
Well, when you phrase it like that, it's not really about if it's for mainstream or not mainstream. It happens to be that usually your customers are those who don't fit in one place. Well, they're the ones looking and shopping around.
Right.
But it's really, we call it the evolution of education. It's a different way of or evolving of what we believe education has been focused on and where it should be really focused on.
In a nutshell, how would you describe where it's been focused and where it should be focused?
It's been more focused on academics as opposed to character development. So implementing, building good habits, breaking negative habits, being a healthy human being, having good balance. And then there's the academic part. But where it feels like most of the way education is academics. And if you get the right grades, etc., and that's the focus.
So how is that done? How is that done practically? Because for academics, I know what we do. We have one class after another class after another class, punctuated by private study time, and then another class. So what happens in Tag Academy that's different?
So the way we approach is focused, first off, again, like I said, it's on character development. So you have to, first of all, you got to figure out and see where are the flaws, where are the challenges, and mostly that you pick up through interactions. So everything we basically do is all interactions. For example, the learning, right? You do have academics, davening, we eat with the boys, the meals together, playing sports together with them. All these different interactions gives us a good idea of where they're holding. And you also have, boys come back and say, this happened, that happened. We have what we call Eagle, so a circle. Every day we sit and we speak either about certain topics that are important or things that have happened, current events, communicating it, pointing, giving the right information, but also addressing, certain behaviors and challenging ourselves to behave differently. So it's mostly the interaction with them, hands-on.
So if I'm understanding correctly, in a typical school environment, these in-between periods of the day, such as recess or sports or breakfast, lunch, dinner, all those things would be considered as off of school time. Whereas for you, it may be the most important, relevant portions of the day because that's where the interactions happen.
Yeah. Yes. And the way I approach it, this is life. Waking up, participating, like that's all of it, is taking the boy on an errand with me. If I need to do something, having that time to speak with them. We take them out for coffee one-on-one to have a conversation. And sometimes I joke with them and they're like, you get into the principal's car or, like, what did I do? And I'm like, you know exactly what you did. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just kidding. Like, you didn't do anything. I said, or like sometimes I'll be like, what's if I just said we're going for a coffee? Would you believe me? He's like, doesn't sound. I'm like, well, we're going for just a coffee. How you doing? You get to know me a bit. I get to know you on an individual level. And usually the response is tremendous because then they get to know you a bit and they're able to accept what you're sharing, the information. And that's really the focus, finding all these different interactions, coming to our house for Shabbosim. We tell the boys, you can always come over, even if it's no meal, come over, hang out with us. It's that family environment, but it's mainly about the interactions.
How many students in the school?
We had, give or take, about 25 for
Got
the
it,
first 2
okay.
years.
Right. So it allows for that kind of individual care, individual attention.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to the bigger numbers, we'll have to figure out how to keep it that same way.
Right.
It's the same idea with our staff, shluchim that we bring. Same thing with them. We hang out with them, have them come over separate for bring-ins for them. A lot of the attention goes to them because we know a lot of what we impart on the shluchim, they then give it to the students.
Oh, so you have 25 students, and how many of these older? How many?
We had 11.
Okay, so you're...
So it's a lot because the goal is there's a lot of individuals and you want to give individual attention. So the more you have, the more chances that there are for someone to connect with one of the staff, the counselors, shluchim. But it also comes along with a lot of other challenges. There's another 11 people that you have to give attention to, and you have to take care of them and show them and guide them as well, educate them.
Sure. How do you measure success?
And for myself, for
the
the student,
For your students, yeah.
well,
Being in academics, it's very easy. I look
Yeah.
at the average grade, and I know how we did.
just to respond to the questions, I really don't know how you measure. It's just I think it's when the person overall, you see they're more active in their own life. They're looking happier, feeling happier, or for those specific things that you're working on. That they're more expressive. They feel more comfortable.
Is there a story that comes to mind of a student which came in a certain way, and then you see them more comfortable, like that change in what
I mean, we have
and what you offered, maybe that a different school didn't offer?
We had a boy who came in. He was coming from a program dealing with certain challenges for anger and things like that. And
When you say a program, coming from a program, what do you mean?
a rehabilitation center. I
Oh,
would
understood.
say.
A rehab,
And when he came in, it was scary for us, like to deal with this. When you hear these words. But we said, listen, everybody, we give a fair chance. And if we have the tools, then we'll work with it. If we don't have, we'll tell you we don't have the tools, we're not the right fit for you. But it was shockingly, the boy came in and he just blossomed. He connected. He felt accepted. He felt wanted. And he just started to grow. And we don't push any particular thing only just to be healthy, have healthy interactions. So Yiddishkeit, religion is not, we don't push it. It happens to be that we are a religious program, but we explain it, why we believe this way and why it's healthy, and it's your decisions, your choices. And then,
so practically speaking, if a student chooses not to keep Shabbos, that's okay.
So the way we work, because you have to create a certain environment, right? That's key. Our job is to create a safe environment. So we understand everybody has a struggle. So if it's by yourself and nobody else knows about it, so then we have what to work with, right? So at this point, it's not about religion. It's about being respectful. If a certain place tells you, not to do certain things on their campus, and then you don't care, then it's not being respectful or decent. So
Right.
that's
So if a
the
restaurant
approach.
tells you don't come with shorts,
Yes. So that's the approach we have when it comes to this. Like, we understand you have, it's your choice, but we're running a program that this is something that we do, and these behaviors are not okay. As long as nobody else knows that you're doing these things, like, we understand everybody's on their level. Same idea if someone is smoking cigarettes or vaping. We understand. As long as nobody else knows that you're doing these things, no one's hunting you down, no one's searching for it. If I come into your room and I see it, so that means you're obviously not being careful. And whatever, what happened from that.
so you want them to hide?
No, it's not about wanting them to hide. It's want them ultimately to realize what is best for them. But you also have to have some sort of guidelines for there to be a safe environment. So, for example, if you let someone smoke openly, how did the first person ever get into smoking? Most people is because their friends were smoking, and then they tried it, and then they liked it, and then so we just basically create an environment where everybody's introducing each other to all their challenges, which isn't a very healthy place, especially if we're working on character development.
Right.
So I'm not wanting anybody to hide from me. I want them to understand and realize that we're being respectful of the fact that you're an individual and you have these temptations or struggles or whatever it is that you want to call it. But over here, we don't bring it in. So I'm not going to hunt you down if I know you're doing it. On the contrary, if you feel safe and comfortable to tell me that you're doing it, we could work on it. If you think it's a challenge, if you don't think there's anything wrong with this, so it's a different conversation. That idea. So
what is a different conversation if they don't think?
Well, if you, for
Kid
example,
may be totally okay smoking, and that's where he's at.
Yeah. If a kid says he totally doesn't believe that there is a God, but at least I know the conversation is different. It's not about the beauty of Shabbos. It's like, 1 second. So what is the purpose of life for you? Like, where do we focus?
Oh, understood.
Right. That idea.
A different conversation like that.
Yeah.
I thought you meant something else by a different conversation. When it's a different conversation, they don't belong here. But you weren't saying
so again, the way we approach it is, if we have the tools for you and you want to be here, perfect. Sometimes someone wants to be in the program, but we don't have the tools for them. We just don't know how to deal with them, or we're not geared for that. We had certain challenges like that. So we had to figure out, what do you do? We had a boy who, the program is great, but, they can't control themselves at night. They just make a ruckus, and kids can't sleep, and it's chaotic. We had to figure out a way, how do you deal with that? Because we don't believe in just kicking somebody out. But at the same time, he's destroying and hurting in others and their growth. We have to figure out that, okay, being in the program is one thing, and having the privilege to dorm by us is another. And if you're not going to follow the basic rules of decency, so then you lost the privilege of dorming by the school. Meaning you're welcome to come to classes and everything, but you cannot dorm by us.
Understood. Okay, so it is a very different approach. So that's in terms of character development, okay, that's what you focus on. What is the character that you want to develop? What is you say healthy, that means different things to different people.
The general idea is, healthy means balanced. And there's an approach that we have, right? There's, the shin, I call it the shin. There's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, 4 aspects to a human being. And the goal is to have a balance in all these. So, for example, you don't want somebody who sits and he learns all day Torah and he prays all day and he's just not healthy physically.
How many connect it to the shin? Because the shin has 3.
Oh,
three
so
steps?
the shin has 3 parts to it. It's like a V with a line in the middle.
Right.
And then there's also a dot.
Okay.
So there's like 3 parts and then a dot, that's 4.
So physical, emotional, mental,
And spiritual. Yeah. All right. So the spiritual is the dot on top. It's aloof, not connected, so to speak, but it's something to reach for higher. And coming straight down from there is the mental. The middle is emotional, and then the left side would be the physical.
So how are you balancing each of those? When you say physical, so what is that? Would be like sports? Is that?
Yeah. So the whole program is built to exercise all 4 aspects. Everyone has to do some sort of exercise physically. Either it's playing sports, going to the gym, going on a walk. You cannot neglect your body. Emotional, we all sit in eagle. We communicate and express.
Eagle means?
Eagle. So eagle in Hebrew means circle. Eagle.
Okay.
We just, for the guys, called it eagle, and it became like eagle, as an eagle.
All right, got it.
So yeah, it's a circle. Communicate, express. When things happen, we need to talk about it. We need to deal with it. There's no putting it under the rug. So learning how to have a healthy way of communication and expressing yourself, and teaching them by modeling it, by sitting there with them and talking about, challenges that we have, if it's current or in the past. Being vulnerable. That's really the idea, is that we take it why we play sports together, because when the boys see how I react, and I'll play competitively. And then when someone does something and you're in that state of being, you can get upset. And then they get to see, how do you handle yourself? Are you all just talk, or do you actually walk the walk? Are you able to actually calm yourself? And they see this and they notice it. And I've had boys who've come up to me after, and they say, the way you spoke to that boy, or I don't think you could have done it differently, maybe. And so sometimes they'll do that, and I'll say, I appreciate that, thank you. I want to point out, there's I think a more respectful way to communicate it to me. Thank you for pointing it out. Or sometimes I do a great job, and I'm like, I really thank you. I didn't notice, I was in the heat of it, and I really appreciate you. And they learn this by seeing, the expression monkey see, monkey do, and we like to call it bacher see, bacher do. So that would be the idea of exercising physically, emotionally, mentally, learning, studying, farbrengen, challenging each other, and then spiritually is doing something bigger and greater than yourself.
Such
So,
as?
so for us, it would be the idea of religious actions, prayer, or acts of charity, having something bigger than yourself that you strive to do and be, not just all about you. And we need to exercise all these. So at one level, it could be it looks small. This kid went for a walk. But as long as there's the intention, which is the idea of like the dot really is like intention, it has an effect. If I walk, we all walk. But if I intentionally am walking to exercise physically, it has a big difference in my my psyche of like I'm actually trying to be
Respect
healthier.
my body, take care of myself, etc.
And that's the awareness that we want to bring, and that creates balance, we believe. And again, everybody on their level, what balance looks like for them. Part of the shin is that there's the three parts. So the right is chesed, left would be gvura, and then the middle is what we call tiferes,
Right.
which is a balance. But really tiferes, we say, is there's a mix of chesed and gvura, right? Avram was chesed, Yitzchak is gvura, and Yaakov is tiferes. Avram had Yishmael, and Yitzchak had Esav. And Yaakov, it says all his children were righteous, right? Complete. Right? So really, when you have the balance of chesed and the balance of gvur, you automatically have middle path, which is tiferes. It's not a thing of its own. Some people need more chesed because the gvur or whatever they experience is so much, they need a lot more to balance them out, and vice versa. Some people need a lot more discipline because they were just given so much. So that's the idea. It's not like this is how it is. This is a general formula, and then depending on the individual, that's how we will dose it, so to speak.
How did you get into this work?
So I got into this work. I was 19. Did not know where I want to go and what to do with my life. But I knew I didn't want to be a student anymore. That's for sure. I was done. And I wrote to the Rebbe, like my friend calls it, the voodoo stuff.
We've had a podcast actually on it specifically. We did a podcast with Zalmy Raksin specifically on this.
On the voodoo.
Yeah, on the topic of writing letters to the Rebbe, inserting it in a book, and he called it a form of divination.
Okay.
What he called, and getting a response and then acting on it.
Yeah. So I was, and in general, by the way, just to backtrack a bit, growing up, the idea of the Rebbe, and it was very confusing for me. I guess post Gimel Tammuz,
Post his passing.
Yeah. And it was just so confusing. We did touch upon this in the past. The
Doesn't
idea.
exist.
Oh.
I'm saying the past.
Okay.
It doesn't exist.
No
I'm
past.
saying you can mention it, but it's not a.
So the idea that, to me, growing up, the Rebbe was made somewhat godlike, for lack of a better word, or maybe that is the right word to use.
Yeah. It definitely felt that way to me. I've shared that.
Part of the confusion was that when you had a different feeling or thought, like I don't necessarily understand these things, it was the response would be, do it, because this is what the Rebbe wants us to do. This is what you're supposed to do. And in an unhealthy youngster, I would say, it basically just it meant to be quiet, and just keep doing it.
Right.
Which had a big effect on just being shut down.
Right.
So it was just very confusing, the whole idea.
I would say there's a lot of different ways to say "shut up."
Yes, it crossed my mind, but when I tell my kids, "Hey, let's say it a little differently," I don't want to, just in case they ever watch it, right?
What?
He said the word "shut up."
Right.
So, just thinking if my kid said it, I'd be like, "Hey,
right.
let's say it differently. Please be quiet." Yeah.
Right. Now I'm saying the idea of, like, when someone starts saying, "Oh, the Rebbe wants us to do this thing and that thing," it's just another way to silence us. Like, oftentimes, there are many different ways to.
Yeah, and as a youngster, you don't know any better, so you follow suit, and that's why it was conflicting, because like I don't understand, and I can't ask. I've been taught to keep quiet, right? I think they call it learned helplessness, or Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Just this is how it is.
Right.
And but I remember, it was just confusing, and I didn't like the fact that my opinion of the Rebbe was based off of other people. When I started to, in general, Judaism, I didn't like it.
You didn't like Judaism?
No, I did not like it at all. It was a burden. On the contrary, Judaism, again, these are only things that I could put words to now for what I was feeling then. Judaism cut down my dreams. I wanted to be a professional athlete. That was a joke, right? To even think about it. I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be in entertainment. That wasn't going to happen. Even if I wanted to be a psychologist, there's no such thing as going to college then, really.
Right.
So what can I do? I'm not learned. I don't know. I don't have a GED. So, funny enough, the only thing that came around was that I could be a real estate agent maybe, because you could take a test and then you pass it. So if you study and you pass it, then you can sell houses and become successful. That was literally like the avenue. Or go into e-commerce or sell and get lucky, and I guess, I don't know. But when I was on that journey, I don't know if that's what you're involved in. That wasn't.
No, it just like the assumption that it's like a get lucky. That's all.
Oh,
Right, that's all.
well, that's all I knew.
Right.
What
We
would I
wouldn't say
know?
it with another discipline, but I understand.
So that was all at this time. What do I want to do? I don't want to continue doing this. I don't feel like I'm gaining from it. That's why I learned smicha. I wanted to feel like I accomplished something, to become a rabbi. Not because I cared to, just because at least I had a certificate that said I accomplished something. So all this, but it was hard to like, what do I do? Where do I go? I like to be authentic and real, but, I don't like this Judaism just burdensome, tying me down. But I feel like and believe there's something bigger and greater in the world. There's got to be. I thought about just do whatever you want. But I told myself it's just a matter of time till I'm in a bottomless pit. And then what? And I wake up one day feeling horror, like I don't want to go down that road. But although I do want to for the short term, but I also don't want to go in the direction of religion and Judaism because I didn't like it. It was confusing and it didn't make me feel.
So you're touching on something which is interesting, because like the choices you laid out are very interesting. Where you had, okay, either I can go towards Judaism, right, which sounded like it wasn't very fulfilling for you, but the others felt like a form of a failed option that still took Judaism seriously, that still took some of the constructs you were taught seriously. So, for example, I can't go to university, so I can only do this, or I can't play sports, or I can't become an athlete, or I can't become an actor. But you can't do that only if you still.
Right. Because you believe, but that's first of all, it's I think the learned helplessness idea. I mean, these are the facts, these are the truths. So when you see the world that way, it's it doesn't work. You're stuck.
No, I've seen this before, and I felt like when I wanted to, like I never dropped out of school, right? Dropped out of the Yeshiva system, even though in many ways wasn't doing it for me. And the reason I didn't was because all I saw in that direction were like kind of vagabonds, right? People who didn't care at all about life. So I saw just a pitiful existence there. Or within the yeshiva, at least it had some structure, although it didn't fulfill me. And I said, okay, as soon as I'm finished, then I'll choose my own life. But it didn't feel to me like there was an option where I can be, where I can choose a different path, but still do it from a place of
purpose and meaning.
Exactly.
And be connected.
Yeah. So meaning it felt like there were many more options it felt like doing drugs all day was more of an option than going to university and having a career. It's just, I've never articulated this before now, but once you're saying it, I'm saying like, hey, I had that same feeling, which is bizarre, right? It feels like the options are either I'm going to continue to go through the school system or I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
This other path of creating a successful life that does not look like the life I grew up in, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like a viable option when it should be. Like, why? Just because I wasn't
Yeah.
feeling this doesn't mean I have to turn into a
I
vagabond.
agree. And part of that, I think, is the fear of when you open up more roads, then you're also opening up the chances of the boy or girl, whoever it is, getting lost in the world. Um, and I believe that's kind of like, yes, we have to be careful, and you want to shelter as much as you can from things that are really harmful. But at the same time, if you trust that God runs the world, right, then each person has their own individual path. So you have to allow that space. This idea about education, a little off, don't let me go too far, is this idea. It says that there's a prayer, a blessing we say after a boy turns 13, his bar mitzvah, and the father says by the mincha service, Baruch shepatrani me'ha'inish lazeh, which means blessed that I am freed from this punishment. And I remember coming across it, I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like, what type of, like, boy's becoming a man, he's celebrating, and all of a sudden, we're saying, thank God I'm done with this punishment. Like,
Right. It is a bizarre prayer.
So I was thinking about it because I was in the, later on already in my life, trying to not just do things because, like, if something comes across, investigate. And, I was a lot more comfortable with my connection with God already. So I wasn't scared I'm going to find something. It was like, obviously, there's something to it. What is it? And, there's the idea in Tanya, it says, the quote in the Gemara, that we swear to be righteous and not wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, and there's another concept that when you're 13, that's when your godly soul, right, your Yetzer Tov is finally, your good inclination is finally in you fully. But your Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is inside of you from the moment you're born. So how could you be righteous, right? So there's this idea that the parents are responsible for the child's education, the chinuch. So I realized that's what the parent is saying. When you're growing up and you're a kid, the parent has to discipline. So sometimes the kid wants the candy, and then the father or mother says, no, you cannot have it. And the kid throws a tantrum and says, you're the worst, you're so mean. But, the parent knows that the kid already had so many, and it's not good for them. Or, the more extreme cases, the kid wants a knife or anything like that. Or you have to go to sleep because you're not going to be able to function tomorrow. All these things. And the kid says, I'm so upset, I hate you, you're the worst. And it's painful. The parent has to conceal that love and put up that tough exterior because that's what's best for the child. And the beauty of what we're saying here is that the parent is saying that I'm free from this punishment. What's the punishment? That they couldn't show openly unconditional love. And sometimes they had to put up this wall of being tough. And it looks like it could be interpreted to the child that they don't love them, they don't care about them. But now that they're 13.
So you're saying at 13, the responsibility of the parent to continue to educate and discipline the child no longer exists.
In the sense of religion, of choice, meaning freedom of choice, God gives everyone the freedom of choice. Now that the soul is fully inside, the Yeshiva is fully inside, the boy or the girl at 12 has to make their own choices. And if you force them, you are doing the opposite of freedom of choice, right? Which undermines the whole thing of what you're trying to get them to do, which is that there's a God and there's a system, and yet you undermine the whole system, which is what God said, there is freedom of choice. But it doesn't mean, first of all, that you let the child do whatever they want. It doesn't mean you don't care about them. No, it just means you don't force them. So if I hope and pray that I'm doing a good job with my kids, that they want to continue because they see it and they feel it, and on their own pace and level. If I want to bribe them and incentivize them, go for it. But my responsibility as a parent now is only unconditional love. And that's why we're saying that I'm free from the punishment, where I couldn't do that before because I had to hold tough for the best, for the better for my child.
That resonates for me in terms of parents at some point just hanging up their hat and saying, okay, I've made my point on this religious thing. I've said everything that I could and should say, and now I'm done. Wherever the child is where they are. Yeah. I guess I'm wondering if that's at 13, even in today's
But I would
age.
say that is a fine line because it could come across as I don't care anymore.
Sure, but you have your
Right.
way of doing it. For example, in yeshiva, where you're saying, "I'm not here to preach religion anymore. Do as you please, but I am responsible for a certain space, and you're going to respect that space." Right. So a parent may say, um, no phones at the Shabbos table, but that's not coming from a religious
Yeah,
perspective.
it's
Like,
being
hey,
a
this is
decent
Shabbos.
human
Yeah,
being,
yeah,
being
this is what we're
understanding.
doing, and
You
we're
know,
running this. It's my house, and this is the way it's going to work.
it's like shockingly, you see most non-Jews will put on a yarmulke when they come into a shul, but then you tell it to someone who's came from home and was upset, and then they're not religious anymore. They might have an issue with that. Like, don't tell me what to do or something like that.
It's not so shocking. That's trauma.
Um,
That's what it does.
Yeah, I was shocking that the non-Jews put it on because it's usually the paper ones at the Kaisel. But the idea is that you need to give them that they have their own journey also. And we have to respect that. And I know it's scary. It's scary. And again, if according to the law, I'm not saying physically let him smoke, let him do whatever he wants. There's a law, there's a legal age. You're still the parent. You have to be there for them and support them. If they want to do something, however you feel and deem fit as the parent and the guardian, that's a whole different story. I'm talking about in terms of just religion. When it comes to religion, do not force. We're not allowed to force. It's the opposite.
She's saying until 13, it may be appropriate. Hey, I want you to do this. Come to shul with me, whatever.
As
it might
terms
be.
of discipline and education, you're teaching them and guiding them. But if you're doing it with hate and anger, so forget it.
Then it's
Whatever
never
you're
gonna do.
teaching, it's not going to work. We're talking about that your real motives are with love, and you thought it through, and you're doing what you believe is best, and this is the best approach, and therefore I'm standing firm. As opposed to after they're 13, it's like, I need to respect that this is your journey.
Do you find that within the students you're working with, you need to get involved with their parents and the way they're communicating with the children in order to be effective?
Do I see that it's necessary? Yes. Do I, or have I figured out how to? I haven't figured out, I would say, yet. I don't know how to go about that. There are suggestions that we make to parents. Most of the time, we push tremendously for the student to get professional help. But yeah, there are times that you can see that, unfortunately, not again with malicious intention, hopefully not, that the parent, the way they're doing certain things, is causing a lot of the pain. And you can't tell that to the parent.
So what would you say, maybe in this format where you're not speaking to a specific parent and telling them what to do, but what are some, obviously most parents are coming from a place of wanting it to be the best for their children, but obviously it's not working in some cases. So they're somewhat misguided. What principles might you share? What would you tell parents?
So you're asking a really, this is like
a big question.
Part of the luchas,
Okay.
like serious stuff. But to the best of my ability, and I ask Hashem to, give me the words that will be helpful. Step one is always check yourself. Check yourself. Everything I've learned and my understanding is that the inspiration that you create for others, it comes from your actions. I don't tell you what to do, right? I model it for you. So when someone sees that I'm authentic and I'm sincere, just because I may look more religious doesn't mean that it's not going to inspire them to want to do the best wherever they're holding in their life and whatever it is that they're focused on. So that's step one. For sure, just always come back to yourself. And while you're doing that, what's my goal? That I'm forcing my child to keep Shabbos because that's what Hashem says? And what about the unconditional love of a parent that also the Torah would teach? And that like, are you really doing those things first? Is this really what's best for the child, or is what you think is best? So this idea, because you asked a great question, and I hope it's somewhat satisfactory, just the way I only understand it, how to respond. Mm-hmm. There's this old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I agree with that. And I've seen how sometimes, you have good intentions and it doesn't work. The person you're working with ends up in hell. You make them miserable and you're probably going to end up in hell because of what you're doing. So I said, so what do you do? Because I want to help you. Oh, so what do you do? So the idea of good intentions means that I decided it's good. Okay, who decided that it's good? I decided. It's good intentions. I want to do good for you. So I'm deciding it's good for you. But who says that is good for you? Who says that that's good for you, right? Who decided? Oh, Torah says Shabbos, but Torah also says you break Shabbos to save a life so they can keep more Shabbosim. So who says in this time, in this place, this is good? So, what I came to realize is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the road to paradise is paved with pure intentions. And pure intentions means I don't know what you need. But I believe that there's divine providence and that we're here together. And my role is to help you and guide you. And therefore, I'm going to do my best by weighing in all the things that are going on in your life and taking action, because you must take action. And I'll pay attention. If you have an allergic reaction, stop what I'm doing. Obviously, it's not working. Adjust until I see, oh, hey, this is working. And then we continue. And if I have that.
Right. If your actions aren't getting your desired outcome, check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell it to all my students, and I do it for myself. What's your goal? And make sure whatever you're going to do is going to get you there.
Right. And if it's not, adjust mid course. Anything else for parents?
Really, the only thing that comes to mind is you gotta work on yourself. You got to work on yourself. You can't. Sometimes we like to play the martyr, and I give my life for my kids, and but you have tremendous anxiety and you're stressed beyond, and I guarantee you, your home is not relaxed. No one's feeling the love. Stop. Come back. Again, you need to make sure that you are healthy, that you are balanced. And then the greatest investment you can make in life is within yourself, because you give what you live. So the better, healthier, happier, stronger, smarter, more balanced, more relaxed, more calm, more clear, et cetera, I am, the more valuable I become to the world. So you got to invest in yourself and work on yourself. And if you see something is happening, so take a step back. First of all, if there's an immediate action that has to be done or stopped, right? That's what we got to do. And then you can think further back. How do I change it? Do I need to go for professional help? Am I lacking? Is this causing me anger and frustration because it's triggering something in my past? Like,
right.
Let's go. It's always going to be best when you work from yourself. It's not about me fixing you. Is that the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, I believe. I just say I believe because I don't want to quote the wrong person. But I've heard this Hasidic teaching that when you see something in someone else, right, it's a reflection of what's in you. Mm-hmm. And some people get scared off and say, well, because I saw someone stealing, so I'm a thief, right? But on one level, it's the idea that when I see someone behaving a certain way, and I get upset. Oh, he's so arrogant. He's so this. It could be that it's not because of a negative. It's just because I relate to the person. I relate to him because in a certain area in my life, I have that struggle. And it may not be as big as this person who's openly, but if I can relate to him, then I can help him. So it's not a negative. It's on the contrary. You know, for myself once, I remember I was running a camp. I asked someone for something from the kitchen, and he responded to me, I can't give you because then everyone else is going to ask.
Okay.
So I got very upset, very angry, but I said, okay, I understand. I put you in charge to run the kitchen and you have to make whatever. I went off to the side and I'm like, but I was just so angry. Still who does he think he is?
So this is your kitchen and
it was a camp that I run with my friends.
I gotcha.
And he told me, and I'm like, who does he think he is? Like in my camp, but this, but I'm like, I understand. And logically I got it. I understand. But I was still so upset. And I'm like, am I a 2-year-old? Like, really? Like, get over it. Like, he said no. Like,
right.
So I was thinking, like, okay, there's got to be something more to this because I get it. But yeah, my body
isn't okay.
Yeah. So I thought, and I'm like, wow. Why am I so sensitive? I hate it. I'm like, wait, that's it. I'm so sensitive. The problem that I'm doing is that it's all about me. Maybe my sensitivity is to be able to realize that the way he said it was hurtful. And therefore, I need to maybe communicate with him how, hey, and I did. I went up to him and I said, by the way, I just want to comment. I understand why you said that, but it was a little hurtful. And he's like, I thought about it after I realized, and I wanted to apologize to you for saying it like that. And I realized that my sensitivity was really, it's a gift. that I'm able to feel the subtlety of where it comes from and how it could be hurtful and how I could actually help that person refine. But the problem was, it was all about me. I was so focused on myself that it beat me up and it got me angry, and it was just my ego.
Right. Meaning all the same learnings can bring us to a completely different place.
Yeah.
So I had this realization once, just similar. You go back to what you're saying, but where I was dealing with the situation and I was really, really upset at the way certain people were handling it, and I felt like I had the right answer, and others who were involved were just mishandling it horribly. And at one point, I came to the realization that they were making the wrong decision because they were frozen. They were frozen by fear. And I too was making the wrong decision, but I was frozen by judgment. Okay. And in that way, it was very different on the one hand, but at the end of the day, what was getting me so angry was the fact that this person was reflecting my own frozenness in the situation.
That you're stuck in this idea of judgment.
They felt like they couldn't do anything because they were afraid the wrong decision would have certain consequences that they couldn't bear. I felt like I couldn't do anything about the situation because I was so angry about the fact that the person who had a very easy way of handling it was frozen by fear. And I'm like, okay, for me, I'm on the other side of the room. To open the door, I got to get up and walk there, figuratively. This person is right there. Just open the door. What do you got to make me do all this work? Right. But I wasn't moving and he wasn't moving. He was afraid. He was frozen by fear. I was frozen by judgment, saying, why shouldn't you do it? You're standing right there. Obviously, figuratively, it was.
Right. And the goal is, right, you would say, so if my goal really is to help the guy, so then what could I do?
Right.
Instead of
so how do I become unstuck? He's stuck, and so am I. And that's, I think, one way. I was just giving a personal example of the way we can often be stuck in something and so certain that we're nothing like the other person. And it's true. On one level, I wasn't stuck for the reason he was stuck, but the end result was exactly the same. He was stuck, and I was stuck. I was stuck because of some story about it being unfair or ridiculous that someone who can fix this so easily is frozen by fear. And that was just a story keeping me stuck versus, okay, so do something about it. If you feel like you have a better solution, so go, move, do it. And don't get lost in the fact that they are doing they're doing something that you dislike so much, but one of the reasons is because you're doing the same thing as they are.
It's in the idea of like taking out the personal ego, so to speak.
Right.
I've had it at times where I had to say some tough words to some of my counselors, and naturally I'm more of a gentle, relaxed, and just the position calls for me to grow up, and I have to, and I've done it, and I'm doing it. And I went and I thought it through, and I made sure, this is coming from the place that I believe is going to be best. It's unpleasant, but I got to do it.
It's pure. The intentions are
pure. It's pure for them to, whatever the effect was that I wanted for them. And I went and I told them, and it was intense. And I wanted to right away go apologize, but I said, I can't, because it has to sink in. Otherwise I don't give them a chance to process it. And
right.
So I'm waiting. It was by davening. So I waited till after davening. And then I went up to one of them. I went each individually. I went to them, and I went to the first one. And I said, listen, I want to apologize that I know was intense, and I know what I said could have been hurtful, and it's not personal. I'm only saying this to you to help because of the situation. It's not personal. I'm like, Zalmy, me as a person, I'm not angry at you. But me, as in this position and the educator, I'm very frustrated with your behavior. Right. And I need to tell you that. And he's like, well, no, of course it's personal. And I'm like, no, I know it's hard to believe that I could say it like that, but I mean it. I'm not angry at you. It's not personal. And I always, one thing to do, I always give a hug. It's not natural for me to give hugs. I did not grow up like that, but I know it does something. I know there's studies and things, but it does help, and the bodies calm down, I believe, when you do that.
So what, after you deliver something harsh to one of the students?
Or, no, not that. Whenever I see a student, whenever I see anybody, to give them a hug. And it's uncomfortable for me sometimes. I don't know somebody, so like I won't do it the first time necessarily. But yeah, giving a hug, I believe is very important. Breaks a lot of the boundaries because you wouldn't hug someone you're scared that would actually hurt you, which would create step one of physical safety. Because when you hug and he sees, hey, it wasn't so bad, now you established physical safety, which is part of the shin that we mentioned. So an idea, especially because we're talking like, let's say, religious parents. I know maybe I said some things that might be sounding, I don't know, heretical or whatever. I don't know,
Like sacrilegious,
whatever it is. I don't even. But
anti-religious.
Everything's with pure intention. So God, please make sure everything comes out the right way. But I've come to realize something when I was younger. What really threw me off and confused me was what I was being taught about Torah and about even the Rebbe, like what people said about the Rebbe, but mainly like they have Torah, and the way people behaved were not in sync.
Didn't match, right?
And it was very confusing, and I was very fear-based. I would think if I lined up to say the Amidah prayer, if my feet weren't exact, an angel would come and chop my toes off till it's matched up exactly. Like, this is crazy thoughts. I don't know why. No one, I don't think, told me outright this is how it is and this was going to happen. But for some reason, I was just led to believe these things. Nobody even asked me, hey, what do you believe, or what's going on? One time one year I just had a horrible year. We went down, my grades, everything. And they sent me to the principal. The principal called me, and I was literally at the top of my class. And then 5th grade, everything just went down. And he called me in, and I was petrified. And he said, life is like a roller coaster. There's ups and downs. Now it's time to go back up. I didn't understand what that meant. Like, I didn't even know why I wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. Later, I sat and I thought, and I realized I was getting bullied horribly. That's at that time. I realized later why everything dropped at that point. But nobody asked me about that. Nobody went further than just to tell me that life's like a roller coaster, which was getting me really nauseous. Mm-hmm. So when we talk, when I was...
So you didn't like the message that you got, that life is like a roller coaster. You felt...
I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't even know. He said it very nice. I went back. All I cared was getting out of the office because I was petrified.
Right. It wasn't addressing your actual...
I didn't even know. Yeah, I didn't even know. It was just, I knew I wasn't doing well. And that was it. This is all stuff years later. I'm like thinking about realizing what happened, why there's just stuff that like stick out. Then when I realized the timelines, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, how come nobody asked me? How come nobody even thought that there's something going on? Other than the fact, obviously, I know I'm going down. I see my grades. I was horrified when I get under a 60. And it never happened to me. Didn't know what to do. I didn't want to bring my test home. So I'm just going back to the idea that I realized that, we say, Anachnu aminim b'nei ma'aminim. We're believers, sons of believers, right? We're all believing in God, right? There's something bigger, whatever people want to call it, if it's universe or whatever, at least coming from a religious home. Most of us can't shake it, whether we like it or not. We're always going to be in search of more. But we're believers, right? And we're believing. But I've noticed that when push comes to shove and things don't make sense anymore, there's a certain limit of belief we have. And then beyond that, it's crazy. Like you're a crazy one, right? People will be leaving God and do what makes sense according to nature, right?
So you're saying there's a space for belief, but it's after the other faculties are kind of exhausted.
No,
in many cases,
meaning we believe as long as it makes sense to us, we do. But then there's a certain point where it doesn't make sense anymore. This belief doesn't make any sense. How am I going to get all the money that I need that officially comes to me on Rosh Hashanah when my paycheck only says this and it's not enough?
Right.
Right. So people will be leaving God. Wordplay.
I understand.
As opposed to be living God, which means that if Torah is stating things and this is how it is, these are the facts, whether you can understand it or not, and that means trust. That means whether I get it or not, I'm in and I do it. And I feel like that was a disconnect that didn't happen. Like people were just, there's a God, there's Torah, there's these ideas. And again, I don't think anybody meant this in a malicious, negative way. It's just what happened.
Right. Where the end result.
I was left to just like wander around until I realized like that was the disconnect. So, And then when I started my journey, wanting to make it real, all the way back, full circle, all the way back to what we were saying about the choice. Where do I want to go with my life? And I wrote to the Rebbe.
At 19.
After I started to learn about the Rebbe and I started to watch his videos and his interactions and his stories, and I realized every word the Rebbe said is about God. Everything he said is about loving others and working on yourself and growing. The first discourse the Rebbe ever gave was Basi Lagani, and the Rebbe is talking about how I'm not going to do it for you. I'm not going to put you on my shoulders and my wings and take you. You're going to have to do the work, but we'll say L'chaim together, we'll sing together, we'll forbrain together, but you got to do the work. Everything that the Rebbe said, I'm like, this is it. This is the role model, the person I want to emulate.
But you felt like until you started hearing his videos directly and hearing his message directly that you were given a very different interpretation of this man.
And the big part was because it was all, I didn't learn or study. I didn't want to. So it was all based off what other people told me. Either, again, not with malicious intention, just what they left me to pick up for myself. Nobody asked me, hey, do you understand what I said and what I meant? For example, trust in Hashem that he gives you all the parnasa. And what do I do now? So how does that look?
Right.
Do I get a job? Do I not get a job? 9 to 5, not 9 to 5? Do I invest in stocks, crypto? What do I do? Right? So to each on their level, you would get a better idea of what it is, but no one said that. Nobody directed me or explained it. They just stated great lines. What does that mean? Does that mean that my mother, who died in a car accident to the day 20 years ago, today's her yard site, I'm supposed to think good and it will be good?
So how do you understand that now?
That I think naturally, when you have a positive outlook, you will find positive outcomes.
Right, but not that thinking good will bring her back to life.
Perspectives are like clothing, I believe. They need to be changed. Some every day, some every week, some every month, some a few years. Some you always have that, that coat you love in the closet. That's always there. These are perspectives. You need to find the right one. Hashem gave us a brain. Right? You don't go into a Shiva house and say, Gamzul Teva. I believe it's true. I'm sure the person, if they're religious, they believe it also. But that's not appropriate. That's not the way Hashem made it to be. That you have to be sensitive. Remember the shin. First is physically feel them safe. Emotionally, need to feel safe. Then intellectually, they could hear the deeper ideas, which will then inspire them to spiritual growth, go and move and rise to something bigger and greater than themselves. But you can't skip. Otherwise, you knock them over.
How old were you when your mother passed?
12. Right before my bar mitzvah. I was actually talking with my siblings last night. We were going through it. I remember as a kid thinking one day it'll be like 20 years. I'll be older.
She passed away. Was someone else who passed away also?
My grandparents also. Her parents were in the car as well.
Both her parents?
Both her parents. So their yard site was the day before, yesterday. And hers is today. She passed away a day later.
Gotcha.
And even at that point, there was no infrastructure. Nobody really reached out. There was one family. This one was Yossi and Rachel Gordon, who
from
really,
Miami.
College campus,
Chabad campus.
So they were there.
Yeah, I'm a Yossi fan.
Yeah, so Yossi was there. He used to play
And
Xbox with
also,
me and my
both
brothers.
amazing.
Yeah, so they were there really tremendously. They were just a comfort, like somewhere to go. But nobody, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't really go to therapy. And nothing.
Right. I'm thinking of someone I know whose parents passed away young, and when we were growing up, right? They say, oh, they're Yassam or they're Yisaimim, and there was a certain pity that went along with that. Right? It was almost the, like everyone kind of felt that. That was the feeling that they almost wanted to evoke from us. And this guy was saying, now he's an adult, he just said how little concern it was to his teachers, to others, when he wasn't doing well in school. It was more of what they viewed almost as a kindness, which was, okay, he's a Yassam, don't be too hard on him. He's an orphan, don't be too hard on him. Which today he looks back with a lot of resentment, saying like, wow, I was a little kid. I was whatever he was, 10 years old, 12 years old. So I was a little kid, and I was kind of left to my own in the name of compassion.
Misplaced compassion, if that is even compassion. You mentioned
I said in the name of compassion, of course.
And you said pity, trigger, reminded me. That was the one thing I hated. Anyone who would pity me, don't talk to me. Nothing. I'm not messed up. Nothing happened to me. Something, yes, that happened to my family. I don't need your pity. Just treat me like a regular person. I was actually, I don't know why, I was very embarrassed
To be
from this
treated that
idea
way.
that I was a yasam and that people like, I was embarrassed of it. I don't know why. Maybe right when I turned bar mitzvah, I already had to start davening for the Amud. And I remember I didn't want to daven in 8th grade. You daven with the whole grade. It was embarrassing. Maybe because I couldn't read.
Right.
It could be
Public
I used
speaking,
to,
it's
yeah. So I used to wake up with my father to daven at 6:15 and 7:70. First of all, they went very fast, and I couldn't keep up, even though I was the chazan. It was no. And second of all, I was dead tired. I was dead tired. I remember I used to fall asleep in the middle of davening, and then I didn't know where I was holding, and I finish off the sentence and look around and see the people's reactions. If no one reacted weird, that means I'm
going.
good. And if they react weird, it means I just said it again. 2 seconds ago, I just finished it. And again, I think also we're not necessarily educated in how to deal with grief and how you mix trust in God and Gamzul Tov and all these ideas. And how do you approach somebody? What do you say? From my understanding is you don't say anything. What are you going to tell them? Right? Being there, being present, but also don't shy away from the reality. We all know what happened. That's why we're here. It reminds me of this story. So I did a training, one of my trainings. I did coaching. I also did grief recovery, and
grief recovery for yourself or
grief recovery. So
others?
part of the trainings you do on yourself, you do through a certain relationship, and for anyone who is looking for this, it's called the Grief Recovery Handbook. So I think very, very helpful and useful. You can get it on Amazon. I don't know if we plugging things. Is that okay?
Plug,
I just think it's healthy and helpful. And so I remember
we'll put an affiliate link. We'll get a bunch of commission. That'd be great.
So I did it because a friend told me he thinks it'd be good for me to do and beneficial. So I did it. It costed a pretty penny, but I did it. And that was that. I didn't do it for anything further. And then unfortunately, in one of the years we were in the school, there was like a freak accident and one of the boys' parents died. It was horrific.
Both parents?
One parent. It was like just something, accident. And they decided, my friend decided that they had got money together to fly me to this place to be with the boy. That's probably one of, if not the most uncomfortable thing you could ever do. Like, to be there, it's not like even someone who's older and they pass away, but it's just like a younger woman, like just a freak accident. It just happened. I was so uncomfortable, but I follow wherever I gotta go. You gotta do, so rise to the occasion and go.
So hoping you, because of your
because I was a grief
experiences,
recovery specialist, and because I had my
because-
childhood experience, and I was,
So why was it such a terrible thing?
For me, it was because I don't know. What are you gonna tell them? What am I gonna do?
Right.
It's a very uncomfortable and awkward in the sense of like you're going to help somebody, but what are you saying? What are you doing? I'm not giving him a lecture. I give him a hug and then what? Leave? What do you do?
Right.
So whatever. I got on the plane. We got there. So the first thing I did was I said, "Please tell me about it was his mother." I said, "Tell me about your mother. What was she like? Tell me some stories. What do you remember her?" Because I didn't want him to shy away. You got to talk about it. It's not a secret. Tell me about. I want to celebrate. And I know it's sad,
Right.
but tell me who this person was. How much they mean to you. Let them express. Get it out. And after that, we ordered some food and we're just joking around. And then a few friends came with me from his friends from the school, and then they went home. And I was there for 24 hours. So I said, I'm not going to go back. I'm just going to sit here the whole time.
Right.
And I sensed he was very angry at God, like pissed off, like furious. No judgment. I got it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is so unhealthy. I know he's going to bottle it up, bury it deep, and then it's just going to be a very toxic person from there on. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I need to get him to get it out. Because he probably doesn't feel safe to express how he feels because God forbid you say something about Hashem, chas v'shalom. I'm like, but I said, I remember he sat down next to me finally, like a few hours later, he sat down, we got a little more quiet. And I said, God, I beg you, please forgive me for what I'm about to do, but I believe this is the correct thing to do. And I said to the boy, said, like, how do you feel towards God now? Like, how could he do, He's like, I don't want to talk about him. I'm like, really? Like if you saw God right now, like, what would you tell him? He's like, I don't want to talk about him. I'm like, what would you do to him? Really, like, I felt bad. I was edging him
Right.
on. And then he just went off and just on a rampage, just, like, full on, like, the whole Sarsa Dibris, every word, everything that he'd do, sucker punch, back kick, paint scratch, like spin in his face, like, I don't know, with every other, word in the dictionary. And that was that. And just, he finished and he just got up and he walked away. And again, I have no idea if this is correct. It's not, right? It's just pure intentions. I did because I believe you have to do something. Later, we're sitting in the kitchen, and so a few of the friends came back, and I guess there's just always the comfort food. There's
Right.
Hanukkah time, there's donuts and everything. So we're just sitting there schmoozing, chilling, just, and all of a sudden I see in the corner that this boy is sitting there, and he's starting to sing a niggun. So,
The same one who was just upset.
Yeah, the boy who's the orphan.
Yeah.
There's a few hours later, he's sitting there and he's singing a niggun. So I'm like, okay, let's like sing along with him quietly, undertone. We started singing with him, and then other people started to hear, so everybody started singing. And then I have like this, like I sing to my kids and put them to sleep. So I sing that nigga and I just continued on to the next song and have like a whole playlist. I just continued singing. And everyone's singing with us. And before we know it, all his siblings and his father, everybody came into the room there. They're all standing there, singing. It was like you felt the
It was a moment.
vibes. And then the moment, yeah, better word. And then we got to Ani Mamin. And we started singing Mevias HaMashiach. And this boy just burst out crying. Just uncontrollably crying and crying. And his brother-in-law came and he sat next to him, put his hand around him, and was talking to him, and he was just crying, and everyone was crying. And like it was at that point, it's like we got the emotion out, that negative emotion, that toxicity that he had towards God, got it out. So the real healthy emotion, the sadness that was buried under that,
Right.
was able to come out and start.
Yeah. So why do you question that? Like even now when you were telling the story, you said it as like maybe you did something wrong or.
Well, I feel like you have to be a fine line between like arrogance and confidence, and you also at the time that it happened, I don't know. I'll tell you what I shared. And I don't regret anything I ever do. I say, God, if it's the wrong thing, let me know. Tell me what I need to do. I don't know, but I'll keep on doing it. And based off of this teaching, the story, it says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? He was the leader of the Jews at the time of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, or the second temple. And he said to his students right before he died, I don't know in which path I'm going to go, either heaven or hell. I don't think he used those words, but that's what he said. And his students started crying. And they said, if you, the mighty hammer of Israel, you're...
Where are we going to go?
Right. And they don't understand, how could you say that? You are the leader. You're like, you're the Rebbe of the generation. What are you saying? And I'm not sure who I heard it from. I don't want to blame it on Rabbi YY, but maybe I got it, or I just a culmination of my own ideas that I heard. One of the possibilities is that he was saying he made a decision. He met Vespasian.
This what?
He met the general Vespasian, who was the Roman general who destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. And he had a whole encounter. He had to smuggle himself out, fake his death, the whole thing for another history class. But he basically he met him and he impressed him by basically saying, he showed him that he was the Tsar. He bowed to him, the Caesar, and the emperor. And Vespasian said, I should kill you for two reasons. One is because I'm not the emperor. Two, if I am the emperor, what took you so long to get here? And show your respect. And at that moment, a messenger came and said, the emperor died and you're the new emperor. So he was in such shock that he said, okay, I'll grant you whatever. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, I ask three things. Seek medical attention for a certain rabbi. Give the house of leadership back to Rabbi Gamliel, his children, and spare the city of Yavne and its Torah scholars.
Okay.
A lot of people argued and fought against. What do you mean, the Beis Hamikdash? All the Jews, Yerushalayim. Where did you come up with this idea?
Right.
right? So I heard Rabbi Huawei once shared, he said that if Torah is alive, so then Judaism will survive. And if you have the Torah scholars who will teach it, who heard it from Moshe all the way down generations, look, we're here today. As opposed to if it would be just a temple, the Kohanim doing sacrifices, it might end up, a few generations down, like a reformed or a very different.
Right. Who knows?
So that was one idea. But he's saying now, right before, he never stopped to think. He made decisions. That was what he had to do in this world. We have to make choices. But now he's sitting and he's reflecting. Was it the right choice? Should I have said, save the Beis Hamikdash? Should I have said, save everybody, go home, pack your bags? I don't know. We'll find out. Am I going to heaven or hell? I don't know. But I believe I have to make a choice, and I did.
Okay, so you're saying the humility around that. Okay, I understand. I guess from, there are a couple of things that come to mind in that story. So one, I did a podcast with someone named Sterna Suissa. She's a parenting coach or teacher. And I asked her kind of for a measure of, I said, how does a parent know if they're doing a good job with their kids? So I have my own way, right? You can kind of see with certain children at certain times it's more or less, but you still see their eyes bright, right? Like the light is on. So, okay, so that's one way for me is, okay, if I see that my children have that light, but you can also, over time, it's hard to see in your own kids. Meaning you're seeing them every day, you're seeing them constantly. This is a weighted decision. You can see it, I feel like I can see it very easily in another kid if that spark is lost.
And you also know the things that you do that could jeopardize that.
Correct. So it's not foolproof. So I said, can you give me another one? And she said, she says maybe counterintuitive, but if your children are, like if your house is noisy, if your kids are expressive, if they're crying, if they're, not necessarily a tantruming, but if they're emoting and expressing and there's a lot of different waves going on, then it suggests that they feel safe, which is similar to, one of the things you said. And I see that. Like this morning, I was going to get a haircut, and my youngest, he's 2.5, but he talks a lot. So he said, meaning he has like a full vocabulary, a couple of older siblings, I guess, who teach him well. And he said, he saw me leaving. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to get a haircut. He said, I want to get a haircut. So I said, you're not going to get a haircut until you're 3. So he right grabbed a pillow and was like very upset about it. Like put his head in the pillow and was like, and I said, it's okay. None of us got a haircut before you're 3. Not me and not your brother and not your uncles, not your cousins and anyone. And he pulls his head out of the pillow and he's like, you're so stupid, Daddy. And thinking about that, like it was actually a great moment, because that's what he was feeling. That's where he was at. I can give him a lecture on not, on respect and everything else. But I think to me, that was the feeling that he was feeling at that moment. A minute later, he's like, I want to hug you and kiss you before you leave, but in that moment, that was the feeling. And wouldn't that be my role to give him the space to express that? And the reason I'm saying this is because in terms of God and man, I know there's the 2 most common comparisons that is given within Jewish literature is master and servant,
right,
and father and son. Okay, so maybe in terms of the master-servant relationship, there's very little room for "you're so stupid, Daddy," right? But certainly in terms of the father-son, not only is there room, but it's
part of it.
What?
It's part of the relationship.
It's part of it, yeah. Like it would, to me, it's symbolic of a good father to be able to handle the "I hate you" every once in a while, like that feeling. So that's one. And the second, related to addiction. So I often say that almost everyone I've counseled on addiction, I've asked them to write 2 letters. One is a thank you / goodbye letter to their addiction. Like, thank you for the good times. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for, whatever it was. It did something for me. That's why I kept going back. But goodbye, right? Which I find is a much more honest view of the relationship with our addiction. Sometimes we can get to a state where I'm such an idiot for watching porn. Am I such an idiot for watching porn? When I was 13 years old and 14 years old, and I was miserable and I had 0 agency, 0 autonomy, 0 a real power over my own life. And I felt like absolute crap. And here I had a tool to make myself feel a little better. Should I have not taken it? It was the right move.
You wanted to survive.
Yeah, in that setting, it was the right move. And thank you so much for having this tool, because had I not had this tool, I either would have had to replace it with another tool, which could have been worse, or something else. So here I am. Thank you. Goodbye. And the second, I always say, is a letter to God, letter to our higher power, a letter to the universe, whatever's, whatever word someone wants
Whatever
to put
the address is
in there. Yeah, but it's a letter to that which, in recovery, we make no bones about it. There's a higher power. There's a God who cares for us, who, has a will for us. If that's the program someone is embracing to heal, then we go for it. Like Carl Jung said, spiritus contra spiritum. We need spirituality to counteract the spirits, the alcohol, right? So we need an equal force. So for some things, we don't need spirituality to heal, but certainly for something as powerful as the spirits, we need spirituality and embracing a higher power to heal. And I often say to write a letter to your higher power. Maybe we can start with Dear God, Dear Hashem, and then let him have it. And if it has to start with FU, like literally start right there. And just how many times, like that has been very similar to your experience, that has been the key to unlock that relationship. Because what is a relationship? What is a personal relationship? I can't express the way I feel right now. What is a God if he can't even be a good father? Take it. You're so stupid, Daddy. That's the way I feel right now.
And if he is God, you don't think he can handle
Exactly. What is it? Right. This petty, punitive, you don't talk to me that way. Don't talk to me that way. What did you do to me?
But I think it comes back to what we said earlier about when you're taught a certain way to be quiet, we don't ask, don't say, so then I can't talk to God that way. I can't express how I feel.
Right, and that's why I was challenging you, because I was feeling like that's still like some of the residual of the negative religious programming that you're still carrying, even though you have decisive action that you're taking and saying no, like express the anger, you're still carrying some of the
It very well could
guilt,
be, and I appreciate you pointing it out over here.
So I had to...
I was saying that. And it's interesting because you mentioned writing a goodbye/thank you letter.
Right.
Part of the grief recovery, one of the things they do is you do a thank you, an apology, the significant mention, things like that. It's all about communication, not holding it in anymore. And then you also do a goodbye letter. And the idea is when you say the goodbye, I'm working with some like kids, they get scared. Like, no, like I love the person when I say goodbye. I don't want to finish it. I want to remember them. And I say, you're not saying goodbye to the relationship, to that person. You're saying goodbye to that chapter of the relationship. So now that someone passed away, it's not the same anymore. Right? So you're saying goodbye to that so you can embrace what is. 100%. And a lot of the times, in order to do that, you need to communicate. So many unsaid feelings and thoughts, etc. If it was an apologies or if it's a thank you or if it's whatever it is, we need to communicate it. And that's why I think, again, you need the balance. You need to learn how to do it. You need to show them how to communicate and express ourselves. And it's okay. And there's a better way to say it. We have in the circle, guys express themselves. And I'll say, if everyone would just stop for a moment, I want to do a learning moment. And I say, is it okay if I point something out that you just said? And I say, he communicated how he felt. Let me ask you, how did you feel when he said it? He says, it didn't feel good. And I said, you notice how you said it, you attacked him. Instead of expressing how you felt. You say, I get uncomfortable when people speak about this thing. As opposed to you're an idiot for talking about disgusting stuff. Right? So then he got attacked. So it's
you should only talk like that to your father. I get it.
So this is all the same idea. When we learn to do it, when we express, then there's nothing bottled up, right? So you don't have to vomit all of it out, right? It's a clear moving system. So I got upset at you, and I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. Or I really appreciate if you could apologize or tell me, like, I don't like that. What did I do? And then we can have a healthy relationship again because we're not holding on to anything. We're burying it. Right, but we need the tools to be able to do that. They say, I think it's Tzemach Tzedek, the Middle Rebbe, what's the difference between children and adults? Right, adults want to be right, and children want to be happy. So I want to be right, and therefore you wronged me, and I'll never talk to you again because I'm right, you're wrong, and get out of here, and that's it. Children want to be happy, so even though I could say you're stupid, Daddy,
right.
But 2 minutes later, I want a hug, right? I want to be happy. I don't care you
Oh, no,
right or
that's
wrong for what you did. Like, and somewhere along the way, unfortunately, we get
grow
taught
up.
differently. We get taught differently. And, that's where we lose that being happy over being right. And I think what you're sharing about the noise, which by the way, I'm thrilled to hear. A noisy house and things happening. We're doing it. No, we're doing a great job. But it's also like the communication and expressing, and it's really the human interaction. That's what it is. I'm a human. You're a human. We all have wants. We all have needs. I tell it to the guys when we sit in a circle. I said, isn't it crazy? You're sitting, fighting, upset, annoyed, judging this guy. I said, we all want to be loved, cared for, accepted, etc. So many other things. We all want that. You want it. I want it. And we all can give it to each other. And somehow we're not. Why? What's stopping us from giving us what we all want? We can do it. We don't need anybody else. Yeah, easier said than done. I know.
Right.
And I'm glad we did the easy part. Now get it done. We got to start shifting. And I know it's scary to do things like I'm saying how we do education. It's not the norm, but not the way it's usually done. I'm doing it if I have to change directions because I believe that's what's correct and that's what's needed now. I'll do it. If I believe that's what Hashem wants for me to do. I'm human still. But I know the more I work on myself and the healthier I am, the more balanced I am, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So that no matter what comes my way, when you're balanced, you can, but if you're imbalanced and one thing touches you.
Right. Something I'm taking from this is the importance of like receiving the feedback. Right. And I think, I did a podcast a little bit ago, and I don't know what we'll name it, but we'll probably name it something like F Religion, Embrace God. Right? I was like, what's the difference between religion and God? Because we were taught they're one and the same thing.
Huge difference.
What?
Huge difference, but continue.
But one of the differences is that in religion, there's no need for feedback. I'm right because I'm right? This is what it says to do, and I am doing it. And regardless of how it impacts you or affects you, regardless of any feedback that I get back, I made the right decision. If it didn't work out, you're wrong. Everyone else is wrong. This is the right way. What you're talking about is saying, okay, I'm running a school. You're running a school. You're sure your way is right, and that's why you keep doing it, despite whatever reactions you get. I'm not sure, but I'm open to the feedback. So if I'm getting something, if I'm putting something out there, if what I get back is something that's a positive feedback, then this gets reinforced and saying, hey, like, look at this. Yeah. The child is healthy. The child is happy. Things are moving in the right direction. Do more. It doesn't work out. Okay, so I'll move in another direction. But that responsiveness feels very godly to me.
I believe so. I trust. And therefore I do. And to comment, if I'm not open to being educated, how can I be an educator? Again, they see for me, if I'm stuck, they're stuck. If I'm closed, they're closed. The best that I can do is help them open by me being open and me growing and learning. And then I create that for them also. And then we can start talking. We have that safety, that, that network going up the lines where they'll ultimately get to a place where they want to grow in whatever it is that's best for them, however it is. I have some students who they're taking on tremendous things, and I keep on telling them, I say, la'at ultimately becomes a lot. For you specifically, I tell them, slow down, chew and digest whatever you're doing now. You're doing amazing. You don't need to continue adding. Stop, man. Some other kids, I say, yo, speed it up, man. You're kratzing. Let's go. Whatever it is and whatever is best for the individual. But realizing that many individuals create a whole, and we need to make sure that there are guidelines, that there is a safety. And that I find is the trickiest part, always having and working on. But if there's authenticity, if there's sincerity, the Hebrew, I think, is tmimus. If you're sincere.
The Hebrew is what?
Tmimus, tamim,
yeah.
tamim. There's sincerity, and again, it's truth. It's emes. When we're connecting to the real gods, not a religion, but the real God who says Yiddishkeit and Torah and the Shah Mitzvah for the Goyim. That, and you connect to that truth, then you will always be what is called Torah's Chaim, the living Torah. You'll always be up to date. You're going to get all the updates. You're going to know exactly how to change and twist and everything that needs to be done if you connect. But if you're outdated if you're following just the guidelines. So, I mean, whatever technology you had on your computer before, 2 weeks doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, Shneir Hickson, who was on this podcast a few times, he shared with me a letter recently, which the Rebbe wrote to someone, a letter of the Rebbe where he wrote to an individual who seemed to, if I understand correctly from the letter, this gentleman wrote a 5-volume book on the concept of sexual issues, whatever they were, right? Desires gone awry, behaviors gone awry, whatever, a lot of the stuff that I talk about in many ways, which is why Shneir shared it with me. And what the letter said was, thank you so much for sharing these books. And while Chabad in general has stayed away from talking about these concepts, right? And I think he quotes a Tzemach Tzedek who said that talking about something makes us think about it. And especially with this subject, we talk about it, we think about it, and then it creates more behaviors around it. So the best is not to talk about sexual impropriety, which is why we don't do it. Unlike, he didn't say it in the letter, but unlike, for example, of Nachman of Breslov, which has his...
the Kapitlach,
where they talk a lot about it. They talk a lot about Shmiras Habris and Pekam Habris and all of that section around sexual propriety. And he said, however, in this country where, sexuality is so front and center to the point that I think he even says, like, he even mentions that certain doctors recommend as a healthy practice to engage in masturbation and things like that. Maybe doesn't say specifically masturbation, but he says certain doctors recommend stuff. Oh, this is a sign of a healthy person, someone who masturbates regularly. So being that you have these problems, so therefore in this environment, it is important that these subjects are spoken about and shared, and in order to save people who've gone off the deep end. And if it was relevant then, whenever this letter was written, it was written before internet pornography, because Rebbe has not been, So the problem is many, many times. And what's my point there is, for me, the letter was important because I'm kind of on this path of, I got to say what I got to say. Everyone else is like, the fact that other people aren't talking about it is insane. The letter gave me a sensitivity for not so fast. There is a reason to do it, but there's also a reason to be sensitive around these subjects. And it's actually because of a specific time and place that we're in that we're doing this. But it speaks to what you're saying about, Teres Chaim, right? The Tzemach Tzedek's lessons were wonderful when it was working. But the fact of the matter is, when you walk into the yeshiva system and 80-90% of the kids are struggling with pornography, to go back to this approach and say, oh, the Tzemach Tzedek says not to talk about it, but if it was working, it would be working. Obviously, meaning, okay, so we have this letter of the Rebbe to support it, right? We have this letter of the Rebbe to support it. Good, so we have this letter of the Rebbe. But let's say that didn't exist. I didn't see this until yesterday. Let's say that didn't exist. What is compelling me to talk about it? And I get that I'm not, not every single decision has been motivated by, not every single decision I make do I check what would the Rebbe do, what would the Rebbe say in this situation. Certainly I try to do it with what I call the bigger decisions, but, maybe the shirt I'm wearing is a bigger decision than the speech I'm giving. Different conversation. But my point is that even without that, we would have to look and say, yes, the Tzemach Tzedek gave a message. What was his message? His message was that talking about it could create more of this. But now we're in an environment, independent of the letter, now we're in an environment where there's no more to create than this. Like, there's literally no more. Where you walk into a yeshiva and every single kid, you assume, is using pornography on a regular basis. Every single one. And if it's not 100, it's definitely over 80%. So clearly, it's not working. But for so many, this has become a religion. There's no feedback. There's no receptivity. There's no openness. There's nothing. It's not a living, breathing.
The Alter Rebbe says, "Man darf leben mit der Zeit." You gotta live with the times, not in it, but with it.
Yeah.
And you shared, it said, this idea of, like, when you speak to it, it gives it power, right? And is it possible that when you speak about it in a healthy way, it'll give healthy power for people to how to deal with it, right? Meaning, if something is already known, like what you're discussing,
right? In this case,
so then we have to give the tools. How do we give the tools to combat, right? And there is a way how to speak about it. It doesn't have to always be in a, very vulgar
100%.
and detailed. And I think the idea of the sensitivity, all these ideas, it's who you're talking to. Ultimately, what's the goal? What's the goal you're looking to accomplish? And then do whatever you need to do to make sure you get to that goal. And if I'm going to say that it's going to, then don't. But it's the only way. Or is there another one? You got to keep thinking, figure it out. If it's like, I have to do an action right now, so then you do the best you can. Right? That's the idea. You're never lost. I feel this sense of, it says there's no freedom, only Torah. It's a thing. I think it's Pirkei Avos. And I feel that personally when I remember that Hashem runs the world, it's his world. Divine Providence, Shkocha Pratis. I can't mess up his world. I can't. He won't let something happen unless it was meant to be. Now I don't go purposely and say I'm going to do stupid stuff because I can't. I do my best according to nature, according to my brain, according to my understanding, and I do it. And that gives me comfort knowing that if I need to now apologize, I got into an argument with someone yesterday, and I was saying things because I felt like he had to hear it a certain way, and then my friend told me he got offended. I'm like, oh my gosh, but then I'm like, you need to go and apologize and communicate that and let him know what you meant. And if there's a negative, you got to deal with it.
Right.
And so I take that's what Hashem wants me to have to deal with. That had to happen. And after I went and I apologized to him, I felt so much better. The relationship was so much closer. It was more real. I don't intend to hurt him.
Right. You don't go there.
I didn't intend for that to happen. But if that's what happened, that's what's supposed to happen. Now I got to deal with it. But I must take action. It's something that I was always very crippled by. The fear. What are people going to say? What are people going to do? And when you connect to the truth, at least what I believe in my world, what the truth is, it's so empowering and it's so liberating because you can't mess up. And if you messed up, that's what's supposed to happen, which means it's not a mess up. The only mistake is to mistake the experience Hashem just gave you as a negative. So when you have that, it's even coming here, like we're going to speak and what's the reaction? I don't know, but this is what we're doing. And I'm trusting that everything trachut wird sein gut, and it'll be good, it'll be amazing. And it'll help and whoever needs to get that.
Right. And be open to the feedback if there's something
100%. If whatever it is, I got to deal with it.
Right.
As unpleasant as it may be sometimes, and as much as I'm getting comfortable, sometimes Hashem gives you a little poke, like, hey, get to work. You just get comfortable with where you are with the same few lines that you repeat again and again. New material. You got to keep up to date. Right.
I did want to say, when I did make that decision, right, like doing a TED Talk and stuff like that, I'm not, even though I did say, like, okay, I'm very comfortable with it, I did check certain things. Like, for example, I remember speaking to Shays Taub and I said, hey, do I go out there and say some of these things? Like, I'm going to Yeshiva. How do I know when to talk, when not to talk? He said, obviously, look at your audience for sure, right? Certain yeshivas you go into, you may be introducing a couple of people to it. Okay, so you don't want to do that. But if you're on YouTube, right, you're putting a talk out there. And who is on YouTube? Who is on Instagram seeing these things? Or if you go to yeshiva that's, of a certain caliber, most likely you're not introducing anything to anyone, unfortunately. So speak, obviously, with humility, obviously with non-graphically, but
the goal. What's the goal, right? And I, by the way,
liberation.
To applaud that you went and you started this. When I remember when you were doing it, and I saw it, I'm like, oh my goodness, like amazing. Because like, whenever I see someone do something that I believe should be done, I'm like, I should have been doing that. And you know what I learned? I don't have to do everything. Everybody's got their journey, and thank God he's doing it. And he went and he started it, and he's pioneering it, and he's going to open the door. And you know what? It's never the prettiest, the first ones, because there's the feedback, and you have to learn, and you get better, and you get better. But I think it's important, and it's amazing. And look now, look where it has led to and grown. And who knows how many more people were inspired to tackle and talk about real stuff that are happening. I'm plugging it in with updated real Torah's Chaim, like being real and applicable, and that we can actually grow and heal from.
Right. The fact is that there's a lot of people struggling with it. And before I went into the TED Talk, I called a Rav, and I said to him, I'm thinking of doing this. More than thinking, I have the date booked. And someone had just shared with me, which something I didn't know, that in Judaism you have the idea of like Voodoo, a confession, right? That we don't do that, right? We definitely don't do it publicly.
Yeah.
There's something in Christianity which you see a lot more, confessing one's sins. It's not something that that Judaism does. So I said to him, I understand that that's not done. Is there any allowance for me to speak? I'm planning on doing a TED talk. It can be seen a lot of times. I didn't know how many it would be seen, obviously, but
Can I share some
there's potential.
personal stuff you're saying
Yeah.
about
So let me
yourself?
fin-
No, about you. I was saying you. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you're asking.
Can I share? Yeah.
You're
Can
asking
I?
him. Can I share personal
Can I share?
things
I'm
about
planning
me?
on doing a talk on
Yes,
porn
that's what I was
addiction.
saying.
Am I allowed to? Am I allowed to? Right?
Yeah.
It's confessing my sins. So he said, "It's not so simple. Let me get back to you." And a few days later, he called me up. I said, "Look hard, because I'm thinking of doing like."
Hurry up.
Yeah, no, not look fast, but find something, right? Meaning, it's likely moving in this direction. So, listen, if he said otherwise, I possibly would have changed the topic in some way, but I'm not sure what I would have done. But I figured, okay, let me ask a question. And obviously, it felt right. Not it felt right. It felt necessary. It felt almost wrong to ask the question a little bit, because like Pinchas didn't ask the question. You know what I mean? Because if you have enough time for a question, then you don't think it's an emergency.
But you had a date booked, so
Right. There was that, but also I had just learned this idea. So maybe it was going to change the speech in some way. And he came back to me a few days later, and he said, you're allowed to do it as long as it's to help people, but you should specify that that's the reason you're doing it. So I said, I'll do even better. I'll make the whole speech about that. That when we share our stories, it helps. When we share the realness of our stories, our struggles, that it helps other people. And that became the speech itself. The reason I gave that context is because I'm not suggesting this idea of go renegade and do whatever you want, because we're getting feedback that it needs a change. Right. But for so many of us, we're afraid to ask the questions. Can something look different than it is? Why do we want it to look different than it is? Because there's so much not working. So ask some of these questions. Yes, Tzemach Tzedek says something about it. Like I said, he does. He says it very clearly. The Rebbe says so in a letter. But the end result that he's talking about is not happening. Why not? Because it's America, not Russia, and it's a very different reality. We have internet, we have the printing press, we have all of these things that have changed. In the 1940s, when they made a movie in America, 1950, you couldn't put a couple in the same bed room. So if there was a conversation happening with a couple, they wouldn't film them in the same bed. Just a conversation. They'd film them within a couple decades of that. You're talking about having a hard time watching a movie without a sex scene in it. And now, we're in a very different reality. So what was there is not now. And these things have to be addressed. And I think that this is a learning for much more. And it sounds like you're seeing that as well with the education.
100%. And we talk about these type of things, and it's, where you say that's where the skill comes in. How do you communicate certain things without going down that rabbit hole, so to speak, and getting into details and doing it in a way that people feel safe to communicate and to, share. And for people also, we've seen when, we did it, who struggles with this? And I realized it's not going to work because people, if they're embarrassed or if they're older. Right. So I said, who's struggling or struggled with this? And all of a sudden, almost everybody's hands went up. And so, because you don't know if I struggled, if I got over it, if I learned how to control myself where I'm struggling. And you realize everyone looked around, and unfortunately, almost 80 to 90% of every challenge, almost everyone's hand was up. And I gave the guys a comfort that they're not weird, they're not, different or unique, that it's a real thing, it's a struggle. And that was just at least step one. There was an awareness. Now, how to go about it and how to communicate is the next step. How do we, but it's definitely, I didn't think for a second that you just went, in the Wild West and just started saying stuff without looking into it. And 100% looking and asking the rabbis, in a sense, you making a keli, saying, hey, God, I want to do it right.
Right. No, in that case, it was obviously also, who did I ask, right? I asked Chase, right? Someone that I respected. I respected the way he was talking about certain topics, the way he was addressing certain things that maybe others weren't. So I understood that he's a sensitivity around these issues, but he's not going to give me some, a printed answer.
Some
It's going to be a
hocus
thoughtful. It's going to be a thoughtful answer.
Yeah.
Because a thoughtful answer that addresses the reality on the ground.
Yeah, and it's again, it's amazing to see that when you push through whatever fears you may have had, or and just go and do that. Again, you could see Baruch Shem, I don't know how many years ago it was, but you could see there's a huge ripple effect, right? And it's not by chance, and everything's just kachar pratis, meaning that Hashem needed and wanted that to happen, to open it up according to nature, the next a decade of whatever we're doing now. And the world, you can see how far the world is going, and thank God this conversation is happening. Thank God we've been doing so many other things in this area to heal and to grow. Another idea, just when you're like for yourself, I do for myself, like when you're doing something you don't know, yes, no. So we say in English, trust your gut feeling, right? And the wordplay, gut in Yiddish means God. Right. So trust your godly feeling. And again, pure intentions. Not because I think it's good or not. What's the goal? You want this kid to be happy? So then me doing this, is that going to help him? Is that really going to help him? Think it over. And by the way, in Pirkei Avos, Reb Chanina ben Dosa teaches the formula of exactly how you're supposed to do it.
Which is?
He writes, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Tes, and Yud. He says, I make sure to memorize it. Usually I don't. He says, if your fear of sin is more than your wisdom will endure. Miskayemes means fulfill, I guess. And if your wisdom is more than your fear of sin, then it won't.
Meaning,
if you're not careful about making mistakes, right? You think you know it all, then ultimately you'll make big mistakes, and the wisdom that you have is nothing.
Understood.
And then you're finished. But if you're concerned and I don't want to mess up, so then your wisdom will endure. You'll make the right choices ultimately.
Right. Just that fear opens us up to a level of humility.
Yeah.
That makes room for God.
Then there's step 2 he teaches, which is if your actions are more than your wisdom will endure. But if your wisdom is more than your actions, your wisdom will not endure. Same idea. Just because I'm careful and I have wisdom, if I don't take action, interact, experience,
you won't learn anything.
Then my wisdom will just be what it was from the book, and I won't be able to adapt and adjust accordingly. When you're in it, right? Experience, action equals experience. So you have to take action, and then your wisdom continues to grow and grow because you're not outdated. You're always up to date because you have your finger on the pulse. You're doing
Beautiful,
it.
Yeah.
And then the third thing he mentions, which I think is tremendous, and I felt like that back in the day growing up, it could have helped, is that he says the idea of a ruach, a spirit or a wind, whoever does things in a pleasant way, in a good ruach for creation finds it pleasant, Hashem finds it pleasant. And whoever does it in a way that people don't find it pleasant, Hashem doesn't find it pleasant. So it's not just your thoughtfulness not to mess up, and I don't want to do the right thing, and you actually go and you take the actions, but it's not just what you do, it's how you do it that is tremendously impactful. And you can do something and then this is the truth, and shut down the person from being able to even hear it
right.
because of that.
Right. I have someone I always tell, I say, you speak a lot of truth, but almost every time you do, whatever you do before makes me want you to be wrong. So to embrace any of your truth, I have to now work through a few things internally, which might be good for me, but I have to work through a few things internally to be able to absorb this truth. If I succeed in working through those things, to absorb it.
And that'd be the idea.
And sometimes we can do the opposite. Sometimes we can do the opposite, where we share a truth, but someone wants us to be right because we've done it in a delicate way.
Yeah, the biased, or hoping that you're saying in terms of, like, I want them to be right even if they're wrong?
No, not even if they're wrong. I'm not talking about bias. I want them to be right. I want them to be wrong even if they're right. Right? So, for example, let's say you have a student who comes to you and says, Zalmy, I'm really struggling with something. Can you give me some guidance on the subject? And you sit there and give him guidance. In that interaction, because he's trusted you before and because he's asked you for advice, so you're sharing something. Hopefully it's true, but he wants you to be right. Right? In that moment, he's set you up to, right? And he's hoping that you're giving him the right guidance. And now that he goes and follows it, that you're right. So his hope is that you're right. Whereas if you walked over to him and said, "You stupid fool, you're doing the wrong thing. Let me tell you what to do," you delivered the same information.
Right.
But in one of them, he wants you to be right, and the other one, he wants you to be wrong. So even if you delivered the truth, you could have alienated him even more from
He's not open.
Yeah, I can tell you that for me, one of the hurdles I had to overcome in order to reapproach Judaism was being okay that they might be right. Even though they're wrong. But they, right? They are, who's they? They is this, I don't know, amorphous blob of people who influenced me in childhood or who tried to influence me in childhood that I found very distasteful. And I wanted to reject it all. You're wrong. God doesn't exist. And if he does, it's not this. And all this stuff you're teaching me is irrelevant and negative and horrible. And then as I'm reapproaching some of those things that they said, like, oh, Shabbos is a nice thing. But I want them to be wrong. I want them to be wrong about that because of the way it was delivered. So what you're saying is what you're saying. What do you say, Hanina ben Daisa?
Reb Chanina ben Daisa says this.
Right.
Yeah.
So deliver things in a way.
So there's a few ideas you just mentioned. So one is for education. We say what comes from the heart goes to the heart, right? So I thought about that, right? Okay, it's nice. It comes from my heart. It goes to your heart. But then I realized it's a lot. I think a little bit more than that. Where it comes from in my heart is what's going to drag out from your heart. So if I come from a negative place, an angry place, it's exactly what I'm going to drag out in you. Your response will be exactly that. It's not just what comes from the heart goes to the heart. It's that wherever it comes from in my heart, it goes straight to you.
Understood.
So I'm going to, if I'm coming out of a haughty place, or whatever, it's going to be a certain part of you is going to come out that way. That shuts it down, whatever it is, instinctively. As opposed to if I come from a pure place, of openness, and I don't know, and it could be, then I create for you also an open place where then you can allow it in wherever it needs to go.
Beautiful. All right, Zalmy.
All right.
Thank you so much.
It is
beautiful.
a pleasure. Thank you, Ali.
Likewise. I'm sure we'll do it again. You're not
Zrat
too far.
Hashem.
As you learn more, come share with us. I'll end with this. So I met Gabor Mate a few months ago, and Gabor I always described as a brilliant teacher, right? A lot of the concepts he teaches, he's not the only one sharing this, but he managed to talk about trauma in a way that so many of us were able to relate to. He's a brilliant, brilliant teacher. And when I sat with him, someone asked me, what was it like to meet him? And this guy, you read so many books, followed so many speeches for years. And so what I said was, I always thought he was a good speech teacher. When I met him, I realized how good of a student he is.
Wow.
And that's the gift. So may you continue to be a good student.
Thank
student
you.
of life.
What a blessing is blessed. Same for you and all those who are open to the blessing.
Thank you so much.